Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, Patterns by D. My name is Dee and today's tutorial is on the banging bomber. But before we get started, please hit that subscribe button, that notification bell for upcoming videos and tutorials. So with further ado, let's get started. Now there are two views with this pattern. View A is a more casual looking bomber with a high collar and a front zipper. And also it has snaps on the wrist. View B is almost like a Letterman type of jacket. You can add patches to the sleeve or wherever you want to add patches. You can add them on the back, on the side, wherever. I have a seal here from this sew group that I'm with called Sorority Wear. And their colors are purple and pink. So I found some colorful trim off of lwstrims.com, which I will put all the information down in the description box below. So I added snaps to this one and also like a rib knit collar, rib knit cuff, and also around the waist. I also added custom letters with my patch on the sleeve, and I will also put down below where I purchased the letters from, and you can also get them custom made as well. You can make it longer as well at the short and lengthened line on the front and the back bodice. You can also make the sleeves shorter or longer to your liking. And with this pattern, I added a welt pocket. I tried to make it easy for people to put it together. And I believe a lot of other sewists use this technique as well to add a welt pocket. So I hope the instructions are easy to follow. So let's get started putting this pattern together. These will be the interface pieces. Pattern piece number 13, 5, 9, and also 12. With pattern piece number 1, you have the front yoke. You will have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric. Pattern piece number 2 is the front bodice. You will have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric. And also at the pocket opening, you have to put interfacing. Pattern piece number 3 is the back yoke. You have to cut out 1 piece of fabric on the fold. Pattern piece number 4 is the back bodice. You have to cut out 1 piece of fabric on the fold. Pattern piece number 5 is the collar. You will have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric on the fold and cut out 1 interfacing on the fold. Pattern piece number 6 is the pocket. You will have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric on the fold, and you have to put interfacing on the front, the opening of the pocket on the wrong side on both ends. Pattern piece number 7, which is the sleeve, you have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric on the fold and cut out 2 linings on the fold. Pattern piece number 8, which is the sleeve band, you have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric. Pattern piece number 9, which is the front facing, you have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric and also cut out 2 pieces of interfacing. Pattern piece number 10, which is the front bodice lining, you have to cut out 2 pieces of lining. Pattern piece number 11, which is the back bodice lining, you have to cut out 1 piece of lining on the fold. Pattern piece number 12, which is the front waist facing, you have to cut out 2 pieces of fabric on the fold and cut out 2 interfacing on the fold. Pattern piece number 13, which is the wrist strap, you have to cut out 4 pieces of fabric and also cut out 2 pieces of interfacing. Pattern piece number 14, which is the neckband, you have to cut out 1 piece of fabric on the fold. Pattern piece number 15, which is the button placement strip. Pattern piece number 16, which is the waistband, you have to cut out 1 piece of rib knit on the fold. Okay, you have 2 options when making this pattern. For the first option, you can use a standard collar, and a wrist strap at the wrist of the sleeve, or you can use rib knit fabric for the sleeve band, the neck band, and also the waistband. Okay, now let's start off attaching pattern piece number 1, which is the front yoke, and pattern piece number 2, which is the front bodice, together. Now with pattern piece number 2, you're going to have to place interfacing at the opening of both pockets on the wrong side of your fabric, the length of the opening. Now you're going to pin pattern piece number 1 and pattern piece number 2 with wrong sides together, matching the notches. Now to give your jacket a more professional look to it, you're going to stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance to apply the flat felt seam. With pattern piece number 3 and number 4, you're going to do the same thing like you did for pattern piece number 1 and number 2. Now you're going to attach the pocket, pattern piece number 6, to the front bodice. Now I think this is an easy way of attaching a welt pocket. I've seen other sewists do this, and I've done it a couple times, and it seems pretty easy. Now for both pocket pieces, you're going to place interfacing over the opening, and with right sides of the fabrics together, you're going to place the opening over those 4 dots, and you're going to pin. Make sure those dots match up and make sure the pocket is secure so you can make one single stitch around the pocket opening. Now to open the pocket, you're going to cut the middle line to the point of the triangle. And once you get to the corners of the triangle, make sure you go to but not through the stitching. After you have cut your pocket opening, you're going to press around the fabric of the pocket, and then you're going to push the fabric through to the wrong side of the bodice. After you have brought the fabric through the pocket opening, you're going to give it a press, and then you're going to do an edge stitch around the opening of the pocket. Okay, after you have finished edge stitching the opening of the pocket, you're going to press underneath the pocket on the long side of the fabric, and then you're going to fold it back slowly to cover up the opening of your pocket. Now, after you have folded it back over the opening to your liking, make sure you press it and then you also pin each side down before you flip it over to the right sides, so the triangles will be on top instead of underneath. Okay, now that you have flipped the fabric over to the right side so you can see the triangle on both sides of your welt pocket opening, make sure you press your fabric so it can get out of your way of when you stitch across the seam of the triangle to tack down the welt pocket opening flap. Okay, after you have pressed down your triangles on both sides of your pocket, now you're going to press underneath the pocket and you're going to do one continuous stitch in the seam of the triangles and underneath the pocket. Okay, now that you have secured both sides of your pocket opening and underneath, now you're going to flip the bodice over so you can see the pocket fabric, and you're going to fold the pocket fabric over the opening, and then you're going to pin it down. After pinning both sides of your pocket closed, you're also going to press the top of your pocket and pin that down as well, because you're going to have to make a stitch in the seam. You're going to stitch on both sides of the pocket 5/8 of an inch. And underneath, on top of the pocket, you're going to stitch in the seam. Okay, now that you have finished making your welt pockets on your front bodice pieces, you're going to attach your front bodice piece to your back bodice piece at the shoulder seams with right sides together. Now you're going to stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance for the shoulder seam. You can do the flat felt seam here as well if you like. Okay, now we're going to work with pattern piece number 7, which is the sleeve. And to attach the sleeve to the side seam of your front and back bodice, we're going to use the flat method with right sides of the fabric together. But before you do that, you're going to fold your sleeve in half and make a notch at the fold so it can match up with the shoulder seam of your front and back bodice. Stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now you're going to fold the back bodice over to the front bodice with wrong sides of the fabrics together, and you're going to stitch the side seam all the way towards the wrist of your sleeve. Stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now we're going to work on the lining of the jacket, which the pattern pieces you will need are pattern piece number 7, number 9, number 10, and number 11. But first we're going to work with pattern piece number 9 and number 10, which is the front facing and also the front bodice lining. With right sides together, you're going to pin, matching the notches. Okay, and now you're going to stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now that you have pressed your pattern pieces, now we're going to work on pattern piece number 11, which is the back bodice lining, and you're going to attach that at the shoulder seams with wrong sides together. Okay, now stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance for the shoulder seam of the lining. Now for the sleeve of the lining, you're going to do the same thing using the flat method by applying the sleeve to the side seam of the front and back bodice. And you're going to stitch it together using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on your sewing machine. Okay, now that we have put all the lining pieces together, which is the front facing, the front and the back lining, and also the sleeve, we're now going to attach the collar around the lining and also the collar around the main lining. So grab pattern piece number 5. And you have two, one that's interfaced and one that's not interfaced. You're going to put the one that's interfaced around the lining of the lining, around the neck of the lining, and you're going to put the uninterfaced piece around the main fabric of your jacket. Now you're going to stitch both collar pieces together using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance for the lining and for your main fabric. Now you're going to make notches around the collar edge. Okay, now we're going to work with pattern piece number 12, which is the front waist facing, and pattern piece number 16, which is the waistband. Now for pattern piece number 12, you have two dots on there, a dark black dot and a white dot. The black dot is for the snap placement, and the white dot is the width of the seam allowance of where you're going to attach your zipper stop. You're going to take pattern piece number 12, both pieces, and place them with right sides together on both ends of your waistband, matching the notches, and then you're going to pin and stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on each end. After you have pressed your side seams flat on your waistband, With right sides together, you're going to match the notches in the center back notch of your lining at the waist edge, and you're going to pin. You're going to do the same thing for the main fabric of your jacket and match the other side of the waistband at the waist edge. Stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance across the waist edge of the waistband. Now you're going to attach your zipper on the center front placket of your jacket 5/8 of an inch away from the edge. Now to attach your zipper to the center front on the placket of your jacket, you're going to stitch first 1/4 inch from the edge. Now for your zipper pieces to be even on both sides of your jacket to match up, you're first going to attach the zippers together, and then you're going to make markings at the seams, at the waistband seam, at the yoke seam, and at the collar seam. And again, you're going to stitch 1/4 inch from the edge. Okay, now that you have finished attaching your front zipper, now you're going to make sure pull out your sleeves, and then you're going to now, with right sides together, attach the lining to the main fabric, and you're going to pin all the way around the center front on top of the collar to the other center front, but make sure on either side of the front placket at the center front you leave a 5-inch opening so you can turn the jacket wrong sides together. Now you're going to stitch all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now you can trim the corners of your jacket seam allowance off before you turn your jacket wrong sides together. Okay, now to attach your lining to your main fabric around your wrist, you're first going to place with right sides together, starting with the underseam of both pieces of the sleeve and matching the seam and the top notch of the fold of the sleeve. Then you're going to pin the extra areas around the sleeve of your wrist. Stitch around your wrist 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now you can use your regular shears or peaking shears to trim a little bit of the excess seam allowance, maybe 1/4 of an inch off around the wrist of your sleeve. Okay, now that you have pulled your jacket through the opening at the center front with wrong sides together and then pressed, now you're going to do a top stitching starting at the front facing waistband up to the top of the collar at the center front on both sides of the jacket. Okay, now we're almost done putting view A together. So now we're going to attach the wrist straps, pattern piece number 13, to the wrist of the sleeves. Okay, this is the last step for view A, which is the wrist straps for the wrist of the sleeve. Okay, you should have cut out 4 pieces of fabric and 2 pieces should be interfaced. You're going to attach 1 interface piece and 1 non-interface piece together with right sides together, and you're going to stitch between on the outsides of those 2 dots. Now the seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch. I wanted a more narrow strap, but you can choose whatever seam allowance you would like. If you want to use 1/4 of an inch or a 1/2 inch seam allowance, that'll depend on how wide you want your strap to be. Okay, once you stitch down the seam allowance on the wrist straps, you're going to trim the seam allowance using your peaking shears or your regular shears. And then you're going to turn it wrong sides together and press. Okay, now after you have pressed your straps flat, you could take your pattern piece and lay it over top of your sleeve and make your markings for where you want your strap to be. If you want a high strap, if you want a low strap, it's all up to you. Those black dots are where you're going to lay the strap in between those two dots, and those white dots are for the studs for your snap, but you're going to make those markings on the underside of your sleeve. Okay, for the placement of your strap, now where those two dots are, that's where you're going to stitch from dot to dot. But before you do that, you're going to place the strap the opposite direction of where you want your strap to close to attach to the studs. So you're going with the open end of the strap. You're going to match the dots in between those dots and you're going to stitch from dot to dot. Then you're going to fold the strap over again towards the studs of where you want your strap to close. And you're going to cover the open end up, and then you're going to stitch across using 5/8 of an inch from the fold. Now with view B, which is the more letterman type jacket using rib knit trim, we're going to attach the rib knit neckband, pattern piece number 14, around the neck edge of the jacket on the main fabric and also the lining. Now when you attach your rib knit trim collar band, you're going to insert your sewing machine needle at that dot and stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance across to the other dot. Now you're going to do the same thing with your lining and attaching it to your neckband around the neck edge of your rib knit trim. And you're also going to stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now that you have attached your lining fabric and your main fabric together at the center front and stitch using a 5/8 of an inch all the way around, now we're going to attach our rib knit cuffs to the wrist of our sleeves. Now you're going to take pattern piece number 8 with right sides together, and you're going to match the notch, and then you're going to pin and stitch across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. After pinning your rib knit cuff trim around the wrist of your sleeve, you're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, now that you have pinned your lining over top of your rib knit trim of your cuff, you're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now after you have attached your lining to around your cuff of your sleeve, you're also going to trim some of the seam allowance off, and then you're going to turn your jacket wrong sides together in that open space that you have left at the center front, and then you're going to give it a good press. Okay, after giving your jacket a good press, you're going to do a top stitching starting at the front waist facing, up the center front placket, and around the neck edge to the other side. Okay, now when you attach your snaps, you're going to use pattern piece number 16, which is the button placement piece. And you're going to use this to place wherever you want your buttons to be, and then you're going to attach your snaps. Hey guys, thank you for watching me put this banging bomber jacket pattern together, view A and view B. View A has the high collar with the zipper and the wrist strap, and view B has the front snaps with the rib neck collar and the rib neck cuff. So thank you guys. Hope you enjoy this pattern. Take care. Bye. Make sure you tag me and post your makes.